Hello and welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Zach Hill here with 8-0 Mike Sigrist. Now, Mike, you were on a very aggressive build of Abzan today. Can you tell us a little bit about what your deck does and why you're playing it?
Well, it's a little similar to like a Jund style deck from Modern or old standard Jund deck. We want to attack, kill our opponent as quick as possible, and use Thoughtseize to take their answers away and have our resilient threats beat them in the long game.
Now,
or the short game.
Yeah, well, a short game hopefully doesn't become a long game.
Yeah.
A lot of people on your team are on, sort of a trickier deck, or people that we're testing out before the tournament, playing, things like Jeskai Combo. We've seen a lot of players on the Jeskai Tempo deck. We've seen a lot of people playing Ramp. Your deck, I guess, could be considered one of the fairer decks in play today. Why, despite that, did you choose to play it?
It just doesn't have any bad matchups. We have a lot of disruption, so nothing that someone's going to throw at us is going to be able to, catch us off guard or whatever. We'll have an answer to whatever they're doing.
Cool. So let's take a look at some of the cards that are actually in the deck, some of the threats that make it up. The first thing I want to talk about, Mike, and we brought this up a little bit earlier, is Thoughtseize. A lot of people were taking out Thoughtseize in favor of Despise. Some people are playing 2 copies. You're playing the full 4.
Yeah.
Why is this card so important?
I think some people play Despise because it's less painful. The lands we have now are, pain lands or whatever, and they're dealing us damage. And over the course of the long game, you're losing a lot of life. We play Thoughtseize because we want to end the game quickly. And in order to do that, we need to take removal spells more often than a typical mid-range deck would. And so we want Thoughtseize over Despise for that reason.
Interesting. Okay, and one of the reasons you want to take removal spells is because your threats are so powerful. An incredible threat base in this deck. If we want to take a look at those. I was just blown away by how sort of lethal these cards are. 4 Fleece main line we've seen before, really powerful in Pro Tour champion Patrick Chapin's deck from Pro Tour Journey into next. Rakshasa Death Dealer, Heir of the Wilds, those are brand new for this weekend.
Yeah.
Why are these cards so good?
Well, Heir is just filling a role that there's not a lot of 2-drops that are efficient that get through Courser and Caryatid in the 2-drop slot, and we needed a couple more 2-drops to make the deck run at full speed, if you will. The other 2 are especially good because they're good both early and in the long game. Once the game progresses longer, still your best draws are your 2-drops. You can sink all your mana into them and make them really powerful threats.
So you're saying you want to end the game early, but if the game goes long, there's still things to do with your mana.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's look at some of the threats that don't quite come out as early, but are very, very powerful. We see Anafenza, the foremost, again, a new card. 4 copies of Herald of Torment, a card a lot of people have been talking about, hasn't really found time to shine, and then Siege Rhino, and then 3 of Sorin Visitor, a pretty controversial card when it came out. So walk us through, why is this base of threats the build that you chose to go with?
Anafenza and Siege Rhino both, again, get through Courser and Caryatid just like we wanted to. Those are kind of defining cards of this format, the mid-rangey green decks, and they fight through it, same as Heir of the Wilds. Herald of Torment is a mediocre 3-drop if you play it on 3, but it's basically our 5-drop. It can fill the 3-drop role and the 5-drop role if it goes long, because we have no 5-drops. Sorin plays an interesting role in that it actually mitigates all the life loss from what we're playing Thoughtseize, Pain Lands, and an Ulcerate that all deal us damage. So we want to be able to gain the life back, and it's also a good threat if it's unchecked.
Are there any threats that a lot of people are playing in this style of deck that you're not, or cards that you considered that you ultimately cut?
There's Courser is a card that it's just not doing enough in our deck. We're not playing any 6-drops or anything like that, so we can't play a long game as well as the other junk decks would be. That's where Herald, we try to close it out against those decks. If they go longer, we can put a Herald on our Death Dealer or our monstrous Fleece main line, and it's impossible to deal with at that point.
Yeah, that's a ton of damage. Okay, so you heard it here, Courser of Krufix does not do enough for Mike Sigrist. No, I see what you're saying. It's just an aggressive deck.
Yeah.
So you've got not just threats, you've got answers, you've got ways to remove permanents. If we can look at those, because again, that mix is pretty interesting. 4 Heroes Downfall, 3 Abzan Charm, and a single Ulcerate.
Yeah.
Those aren't numbers you arrive at accidentally.
No,
How did we get them?
Ulcerate is just very efficient. A lot of our lands come into play tapped, so there's awkward turns where you can't hold up enough mana for another threat, or maybe you have to play a tap land on one, a tap land on two, but still deal with a Seeker of the Way or another Fleecemane Lion or another Rakasha Death Dealer, and you have Ulcerate to deal with that. Hero's Downfall is just catch-all, best removal spell out there. Abzan Charm is interesting in that it deals with creatures. Against a control-ish deck, you can use it as a Sign in Blood, draw 2 cards, get yourself deep in your deck, find your resilient threats. And it makes it very hard to block with the 2 counters things. You can attack with your Siege Rhino into a Polakranos, for instance, whether you have that or not. So sometimes, they'll block or whatever, and if you have it, you can just kill it anyways and trample it, or you can, put the counters on it, regardless of, if they have a monstrous or whatever.
Is there a mode on Abzan Charm that you use most of the time? I would assume it's the removal version,
yes,
but I don't know.
Yes, it's mostly the removal version, but all of them are pretty good effects. I put 2 counters on a Fleecemane Lion to kill an Ashiok earlier today.
And that is brutal.
Yeah.
So let's look at, obviously you've got all these spells. You have to cast them at some point. I'm interested in this particular mix. A lot of people are playing a ton of temples, not so much on the tri-lands. Here you prioritize 4 copies of Sandstep Citadel, only 5 of the temples. Why is that?
The Citadel is the best card in the deck.
Oh, yeah?
We have Fleecemane Lion and Rakasha Death Dealer, and it's really hard to cast both of them in 2 with this mana base. So we need to make sure we have a land that taps for all the colors we need. The temples are good. I mean, they're dual lands. They are kind of awkward in the deck. We're trying to come out early, and it's hard to play a tap land into a tap land and play your 2-drop.
Right.
That's where you have Thoughtseize or the Ulcerate to, if you have to do that, then you can still cast a spell in those turns and not, lose out on your turn or whatever.
Totally. Not all the lands in the deck come into play untapped. We've got the temples here, but let's take a look at what else we have now. You were alluding earlier to taking a lot of damage from your lands. Is this what you mean? 4 Heath, 4 Caves, 2 Wastes?
Exactly, and that's why you need Siege Rhino and Sorin to gain back the life. These are the most efficient ways to cast your cards on curve, but at the same time it comes at a cost, and that's the cost is life, and we need to mitigate that with Sorin and Siege Rhino.
And finally, just to take a look at the last few lands in the deck, there's one other way you mitigate it, and this is something that's really interesting to me. A lot of the time you see people just run a single Urborg, 2 Yawgmoths. It's like better than a swamp. You've decided to play 2 and actually 0 basic swamps. Is it in order to deal with the pains to cast Herald of Torment? Why 2 Urborgs?
Absolutely. It's hard to cast Hero's Downfall it's hard to cast Hero's Downfall or Herald of Torment on turn 3 when you cast the Fleecemane Lion on turn 2. It's just a very difficult thing to do. Urborg allows for that. And it also helps with the fetches. We have 4 Windswept Heath, but only 3 lands to fetch for. Occasionally you'll draw a forest and a plains or something, and you'll draw your Windswept Heaths, but you'll have your Urborg to at least turn them on and still get value out of them, tap them for mana.
Oh, right, because you can tap the Windswept Heath itself for black mana.
Yes.
All right, that's really cool, and it looks like it's paid off, Mike. You're sitting here at 8-0 on top of the tournament, along with Yuya Watanabe. That's a Mike Sigrist here with Abzan Aggro. Let's head back to the desk with Rich Hagon here at Pro Tour Cons of Tarkir. Hey, thanks.